If you're looking to start a tech career in 2026 that has strong demand, strong salaries, and long term opportunities, becoming a cloud engineer is one of the best paths that you can choose right now. Businesses everywhere are moving their systems into the cloud, and at the same time, AI is creating even more demand for the cloud infrastructure because every AI application needs servers, it needs networking, storage, automation, monitoring, and security all running behind the scenes. That means that companies need people who understand how to build and manage cloud environments. But here's the challenge. A lot of beginners hear terms like cloud engineering, DevOps, Kubernetes, automation, infrastructure as code, AWS architecture, and honestly, it all just sounds a little bit confusing. So I'm going to help demystify a lot of that in the video today. So what does a cloud engineer actually do all day? Are they coding? Are they managing servers? Are they building applications? Are they fixing networks? And which technologies do you actually need to learn in order to get hired? That's exactly what we're going to cover in this video. By the end of the video, you'll know exactly what this role looks like in the real world, which skills matter the most, the roadmap to get you there if you're looking to build a career as a cloud engineer, and how I would go about doing it today if I was going to start from scratch. So firstly, what does a cloud engineer actually do? At a high level, cloud engineers build, manage, automate, and troubleshoot cloud infrastructure. So what is cloud infrastructure? Well, the cloud essentially is an operating model in which services like Amazon Web Services offer compute capabilities as a service. That means they have servers, they have storage, they have networking capabilities, databases, artificial intelligence services, all sorts of services which are essentially the building blocks of applications. So now companies can come along, sign up for an Amazon Web Services account, and they can start utilizing all of these different services. Maybe they want to store some data. Maybe they want to run some software, so they need a compute server. They need to connect it all together with networking. They need to build event-driven architectures where when one thing happens, something else gets triggered. AWS gives them all of these different building blocks, and it's the cloud engineers that help to piece it all together. So if you think about almost any big modern company today, like Netflix or Spotify, banks, finance companies, retail companies, AI startups, healthcare, they all run in the cloud. And all of those companies need servers, they need databases, they need networking, security, storage, monitoring systems to see what's happening, scaling, so things scale automatically based on demand and automation. Cloud engineers are there to make sure that all of that works. Now, depending on the company, the exact responsibilities can vary a little bit, but here's a practical example. Let's say a software development team builds a web application. So the software devs are the ones that write the code. The cloud engineer might be responsible for creating the infrastructure, things like launching Linux servers, configuring the networking, setting up load balancers, managing the permissions and security settings, automating the actual deployments of the software and those infrastructure components. And then on an ongoing basis, they're going to manage it. So they're monitoring system health. They're making sure things scale appropriately when demand for the application changes. And then they'll be troubleshooting outages and performance problems as they arise. So cloud engineers sit somewhere between infrastructure, operations, automation, and software delivery. It's a really great career because modern applications and modern businesses depend very heavily on all of this cloud infrastructure. If a cloud system fails or applications stop working, customers can't log in. These are big problems for companies. So companies need people who can make sure that all of this stuff actually keeps working and deploy it in the first place as well. So what would a typical day look like for a cloud engineer? This is something beginners rarely understand before entering the field, so it's good to get an idea of what you're going to be doing if you do this job. Cloud engineering is not usually about sitting there and coding applications all day like a software developer might. A cloud engineer's day is a little bit more varied. You're going to be building infrastructure, so actually deploying systems, deploying those components we talked about, like servers and containers, building the networking configuration. Troubleshooting problems as they arise, automating tasks so we've got some repeatability of business processes, ensuring that reliability is really good. So you've got to constantly monitor and improve reliability of systems. support deployments as we're deploying new things, monitoring, and so on. Often working with developers, architects, security teams, network engineers, etc., to make all of this work together. So one day you might be troubleshooting why a server can't connect to a database. Another, you might be automating infrastructure deployments using infrastructure as code tools like AWS Cloud Formation or Terraform. And another day you might be improving the monitoring and alerting systems. So lots of different things that you'll be doing as a cloud engineer. Of course, all of this is practical. All of this is extremely hands-on. This is a really hands-on role, so you've got to make sure that you have hands-on experience and hands-on skills in order to land a position as a cloud engineer. Now, I'm going to talk about why I think AWS is one of the best places to start. So AWS is one of the cloud platforms. There are actually three major cloud providers. So AWS, Amazon Web Services, there's Microsoft Azure, and there's Google Cloud Platform. Now, they're all really good. AWS happens to be the biggest, and that's why there's more job opportunities in AWS. And that makes it a really good place for beginners. The nice thing about AWS is that it exposes you to nearly every major cloud concept. And if you go and learn some of the other clouds later on, like Microsoft Azure, you will find that you recognize how they are built, how they are architected, and the different components that exist in the cloud, because they're very similar across different clouds. Now, one mistake a lot of beginners make is they think that they need to learn everything in AWS, and there's literally more than 200 services in AWS. The reality is that most cloud engineering jobs rely heavily on a smaller set of core services. So you do need to know some stuff really, really well. Other services you might never touch or very rarely. So let's have a look at a few of the services you will be expected to know quite well. The first is Amazon EC2. That's the Elastic Compute Cloud. EC2 allows you to run servers on AWS, essentially virtual machines. So if you're familiar with VMware or you're familiar with Microsoft Hyper-V, it's basically that in the cloud. So you can run Linux and Windows servers. Linux is the most popular operating system in the cloud, so you really need to know Linux. Windows is good too, but Linux, you need to understand the command line. You need to understand how to work and manage Linux. So as a cloud engineer, you'll need to know how to deploy EC2 instances, how to connect to those instances, how to look at log files and troubleshoot problems, how to implement load balancing, secure shell into the server, check which services are running, and monitor CPU and memory usage and other performance metrics. So really need to understand EC2 very well and the associated services like auto scaling and elastic load balancing as well. Now, networking is extremely important. Of course, in the cloud, we still have networks and we have management of those networks. We get to configure and deploy our network settings the way we need them to be. In the cloud, we have something called a VPC, a virtual private cloud. That's where we create our own public and private subnets, set up our routing configurations, configure internet access and internet connectivity to on-premises networks or other clouds even, security groups, network ACLs, essentially firewall settings. So as a cloud engineer, you need to know how to configure all of those settings. Cloud engineers will also work with DNS, the domain name system, load balancing, as I mentioned before, NAT gateways and VPN connections. So networking, really important, knowing how to make sure that you configure that end-to-end connectivity between servers, databases, etc. Very, very important. Now, IAM, the Identity and Access Management, and cloud security, these are also extremely important concepts. You need to know how to create the relevant components here, users, groups, roles, setting permissions appropriately, always making sure that you're following the principle of least privilege so we're secure in what we deploy. And then as we're configuring and deploying these different services in the cloud, we need to know how to configure them securely. Networks, security for EC2 instances, security for databases, and so on and so forth. You'll also need to know how to deploy storage and data services. So things like block storage, which would be Amazon Elastic Block Store, the EBS service, Amazon S3 for object-based storage, and Amazon Elastic File System for network-based file storage as well. So important to know how to use these different services and in which use cases you would choose one over the other. How to set up things like lifecycle rules, backups, security settings, storage policies, DR recovery, and all those types of things. So very important to know a series of different storage services on AWS as well as database services as well, like the relational database service and DynamoDB. A major part of a cloud engineer's job is monitoring and troubleshooting. So monitoring will be using services like Amazon CloudWatch, where we can look at metrics to see what's actually happening. How is the CPU being utilized? What about memory? Are we running short on storage space? That type of thing. So we're monitoring our systems and looking for where there might be some issues coming up or where issues have actually arisen, and then troubleshooting those problems or preventing those problems from occurring in the first place. So CloudWatch for metrics and logs, alerting, dashboards, etc., and other tools which a company might deploy as well. There's lots of different monitoring software out there. So companies typically use a combination of AWS native services and then maybe some third-party services as well. Now, infrastructure as code and automation is really important for a cloud engineer. We want to be able to repeatably deploy using consistency, security, and to reduce operational overhead. So we can use tools like AWS Cloud Formation or HashiCorp Terraform. So a cloud engineer needs to know how to use these tools, how to read and how to write the template files that are used to deploy infrastructure using code. A lot of modern applications use serverless or containers. So serverless is a series of services in AWS that are managed for you, and we can connect them together using these application integration services. So tools like AWS Lambda, that's a function as a service. So it's a serverless compute service. We've got serverless databases like DynamoDB, and then we've got application integration services like Amazon SQS and Amazon SNS for sending information or storing information, which is going to be picked up by different components of an application. So as a cloud engineer, you need to know how to use those services as well as the containers. So containers is where we're running Docker containers, maybe on Amazon ECS, maybe on the Elastic Kubernetes service or natively on Kubernetes. Now, one of the things that comes up all the time when I'm talking to people about entering into this industry or moving into something like a cloud engineer role is people often ask me, do you need programming skills? It's a very, very common question. Now, the answer is yes, but not as much as you might think. So cloud engineers are definitely not full-time software developers, but scripting and automation skills are very useful. So it's really useful to know some programming. Python is the most popular language. I think it's the most useful. It's really heavily used in AI these days, and it's very heavily used in the cloud as well. So it's probably the most useful programming languages that you can actually learn at the moment. Also, you'll need to know how to read and write JSON, JavaScript object notation. That's used for a variety of different use cases within the cloud, such as defining policy settings. And also YAML, that's often used for those infrastructure as code templates, for example, that we use with AWS Cloud Formation. So there's a little bit of programming knowledge in Python. The other two are not really programming languages per se. They're about defining certain settings in a format, which is fairly easy to learn, to be honest. It's not going to take you a great deal of time to learn that. So a little bit of programming, definitely, not too much. You don't need to be an expert programmer. So how do you learn the skills to become a cloud engineer? So there's a couple of elements to this. One is certifications. Certifications give you a structured way of learning the particular tasks, services, skills that you need to know for a job role. So for example, the AWS certifications align to specific job roles. So we have, for example, the Solutions Architect Associate. That's useful for people who want to become a solutions architect. We have the Developer Associate for those who want to become a developer working with the cloud. The Cloud Ops Engineer Associate for people who work in the Cloud Ops. Now, there isn't a specific certification for cloud engineering. What is useful is a bit of a combination across those. So it's useful to do at least two certifications. For example, the Developer Associate and the Cloud Ops. Those will give you an understanding of basically all of the different cloud skills we've just discussed: compute, storage, networking, the DevOps components for CI/CD as well, and a bit of that operational knowledge. So certifications are a useful pathway for building those skills. However, remember I said this is a very hands-on role, so you do need to have hands-on capability. So just doing certifications is not going to be enough. You need to make sure that you've also got those practical skills that are aligned with the actual job role. A lot of recruiters and hiring managers today will put you in a technical test, and they will test your ability to actually do things in the real world versus just knowing some theory. So make sure that you get that hands-on expertise as well. Practice doing projects, build applications, deploy infrastructure, just like you would if you were doing this job in the real world. Now, if you're looking for someone to help you along that process, I have a program called the Cloud Mastery Bootcamp. So check the description in the link of this video. We work directly with our students. We have live training, Q&A, office hours every week, and we give you a lot of project work. So you get lots of opportunity to build a really good portfolio that you can showcase to employers as well. So if you're interested in that, then check the link in the description of the video. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Like and subscribe if you did, and we'll make more videos just like this one.